this. We got that and this. Of course. Okay. Alright, well, that does its thing and gets started. Welcome to Magic and Mayhem. I am, of course, TanktheElder, and today we will be playing some more Minecraft on my... I'm calling it a forever world. It's going to be here as long as nothing happens to it on this computer, at the very least. So let me hop in there and get that all squared away for us. It is Friday, and I'm coming to this with very, very few plans. So, let's see. I think we might start doing some of that because it's going to continue the theme from earlier this week of feeling like we're getting some progress on this. So... I thought about doing that. The problem is it doesn't take very long to get us below water level, and I don't really want to be slamming through water breathing potions right now. So we'll come over here to this portion, and we'll start laying in some more stone. I don't mind jumping a little bit, but... Alright, so... Let's come here. That's interesting. Sorry, I saw that it was loading up 21.8. So I kind of assumed that my resource pack wouldn't be up to date. I'm happy that it is, because I really, really don't care to constantly, like, because it's one of the mods that I actually do for Minecraft. It's one of the reasons why I get more frustrated when they come out with major changes real close together. Like, for all that I'm glad they're updating the game, to constantly have to go and look for whether the resource pack guys have gotten the newest version out yet or not, because I find the 16x16 just a little bit gritty to the eye, which is okay. I mean, it's not like the Minecraft default look is terrible. It just, especially when you're playing on a really nice monitor, it grates a little bit, and then, like, you go back to, you know, using other programs that are at a resolution that actually makes use of your screen's capacity, and it just feels so jarring going between the default and the other. But that's okay. Like I said, I'm not... It's not that I don't like default Minecraft, but changing out resource packs for a little bit smoother experience is definitely something that I prefer to do when I can. Just, it's one of the few things that I consistently go, this makes it feel like a much more pleasant experience for me. Again, it's not a, oh, hey, I can't play this if I don't have a resource pack going. But to me, it is a much more pleasant experience to have that than to sit here going, gee, I wish I, shouldn't have done that. Oh well. Too bad. I did it. And now I gotta work with it. So. But yeah. So. I'm happy to see that, at least for the moment, I don't need to be changing resource packs. Because they've done pretty big releases here through the summer. Like, back-to-back kind of thing. Which is unusual for how it had been there for a bit. Like, for a little while it was like, okay, we're gonna do 21.1, and it's gonna be six months till we bring out 21.2. And now it feels like every 4 weeks they're coming out with the next major change. So, and I'm sure it would make a lot more sense if I was one of the people who, really clung to listening to what each of the patches is doing, what's coming down the pipeline. So I'm just going to go ahead and apologize to those of you who might show up here looking for that. I am not the source nor the channel that you're going to find that. As is pretty typical for me, I am the excuse me. I am the kind of Minecraft player who is here to enjoy playing the game, and I will pick up the other metas for it as I go along and find other things that I would prefer to do. So yes, if that is not how you prefer your Minecraft tubers, then I hope you will enjoy the time that we do spend together, but understand that's not everybody's cup of tea, and that's okay. I think I've gabbled on about that quite a bit, where Minecraft is just one of those games where you really can find a play style that works for what you want to do. Like, it's kind of fun seeing the people who have figured out how to make moving vehicles and the like using without jumping into like modded Minecraft, where it's specifically why they designed that pack in the first place. Like, I've seen other circumstances where they do stuff like that, so in that sense I don't. But they have they've created a redstone system that is sufficiently complex to allow creation of something that moves more or less across the landscapes. Pretty cool. It would have to end up being a way of using the game that was extremely straightforward to create those. And I have not seen one that appears that way so far. Now, possibly when, as they make more advancements and just, the community lets Mojang know, like, hey, we really like the capacity to do this. Can you make it easier for us to do? I'd be unsurprised if they don't at some point add things that make creating machines that will articulate across a Minecraft world, like, more so than just boats and what you can do with minecarts. If that is a direction that the community makes known they really want to go. That seems to be one of the things, like, I know there's griping about, there's certain things that we've asked about for a really long time, and it seems to take Mojang forever to respond to some things, and then other things, you almost get the, hey, here's a crack-banged idea, and yet once everybody gets over the shock of, like, this sounds really weird, they go, oh, wait, okay, yeah, it is kind of weird, but actually it makes life so much better when you're playing in this way, or that way, or the next way. Alright. Let's put a dent in my torch usage. Torches. Precisely because of that. They're spitting at something. I'm not surprised. A llama! Watch out. They spit. Okay, so. Yeah, we can go for a little ways. Oh, that was my last arrow. Okay. We really do need to get that chicken farm going. So goodness knows, with having a Fortune 3 shovel, I've got plenty of flint. I just don't have many feathers for my fine feathered friends. Alright, let's come over there. I always find it interesting that they don't put the like the wandering traders there are always a little ways off from you. I just find it interesting that they have it as kind of an arbitrary distance. Now, granted, one of the things that I've done, because I've been trying to keep as much of this as spawn-proof as possible, has been the... I haven't allowed a lot of room for the traders to spawn, because I've built so much of the floors that I use as half slab floors. Again, just attempting to make sure that I'm not having to just drop torches every darn place. Because even with as renewable as trees are, and even as easy as it is to get charcoal from the wood, it's still a pain in the gooseberries to try and keep up on torches when you're using those. So in that sense, I kind of understand why I have a, like, why did you spawn in over there reaction to the wandering traders. And then, of course, you have the others where if I was building on land, it would have appeared right in front of my door, and as I'd have been going out, I wouldn't have been able to tell if there was a creeper there or not, because either the llama or the trader would have been, like, right up in my grill. That feels weird to say. Like, for all that was slang when I was in, like, middle school and everything. That just feels weird to say. Okay, let's drop some more torches. That is always one thing that kind of fascinates me as you go along and meet people and you're like, oh, hey, here's these shared experiences that we had with each other. How did this affect you? Oh, you didn't find it to be nearly the pain in the ass that I did. Well, that's interesting to know. And then you have others who you get into things and you're like, oh, that meant something? Oh, I did not know that was important. Okay. All right. Come over here. So. Yeah. So, we can do this. And then we'll see how long it takes before I decide I've done enough of this for today and move on to a different project for a little bit. Because I feel like I'm kind of hitting a point where I need to be using up the resources I've gathered, because I actually have quite a few double chests of stone, of cobble, a couple chests of andesite, which I'm still trying to decide, because it is not as easy to get as the stone is. I'm still trying to decide, do I make that a major portion of the build, or do I find a way to very specifically use the andesites? And we leave some of the stuff, like, realistically, unless you get into a boat and come in over here under this portion of the Star Destroyer that is in fact over the water, you're never going to see this layer that I'm putting in right now. Because when you're in here, the notion is this is going to end up being a 2-block thick, 2.5 block, because unless I have something specific that I'm doing, like a specific structure I'm building or something, over here there's going to be things on top of this, but I'm not really planning to build anything underneath here. For, like, if I decided I'm making a squid farm, I will just go ahead and make it in the bowels of the ship. Like, because there is part of me that goes, I'm gonna need a whole bunch of I will need a bunch of black dye to create, like, the gray and light gray dye for glass. And while I don't think I'm going to necessarily use it on the Star Destroyer at this point, having the capacity to make gray and light gray will be a rather valued skill, because one of the things that I am intending to do is to have a whole bunch of spaceport buildings and things like that, and there's going to be different places that I need to make gray things. And while I have kept most of the Star Destroyer here in the brighter grays, definitely in the light, like, if you were to attempt to refine stone and cobblestone and andesite into the dye that they are most closely related to, they're very clearly close to the light gray dye. Like, that's where they fall on the saturation spectrum. They're brighter grays, and that's what most of the exterior of this needs to be. It's why we use the resources we're using. But there may be some things that call for me to master the concrete recipe, and, you know, I don't see using any of the terracottas in the Star Destroyer. I don't think, because they are so very warm, and the vast majority of the Star Destroyer should be cool in terms of... So this gets into color theory, which I don't want to spend too much time on, because for one, I use it more intuitively than what some folks who can talk about color theory do. There is an art and there is a science to color theory, but it basically is a case. Basically, even when you look at a yellow or a red or something like that, there are, short of getting the purest pigments of yellow or red or blue, or that you can, there's a color temperature, and when we come back, let's see, okay, these are my last blocks at any rate, so why don't we see how we do closing this up. Okay, so I'm going to have to go back anyway, and I can show you very simply what I mean and why I would say that stone, for all that this is gray, and there is nothing that I could point to and go, see, that's yellow, or that's definitely blue in there. I think when you see it, you'll understand what... Oops. See. Music. So, not ideal, but we'll make it work. Should see what he might consider buying. Because I do not have many emeralds. I have not really attempted to get trades going with the librarians that I have running my golem farm. So, yeah. So we might as well see what he wants and see if it's something I'm willing to make up 3 or 4 trades for. And then I can reset this. But okay, so let's go check the Wandering Trader. Let's see what he's got, or what I can sell to him. If it's something easy, we will sell. If it's not, well then, buddy, I'm trying to talk to your master there. Okay. Wants milk and spider eyes. I have neither, and doesn't look. The cactus might be worth it, because one of the laments I have so far is I have not discovered warm biomes, mostly. So I think I spent most of my other emeralds though. And I don't have the buckets of milk and water both. They always feel really expensive. Even with my golem farm, they end up feeling very expensive, and I don't like that. So, I don't think we're gonna mess around with trades with him, but let's come up here and grab more blocks from here. What did I do? I'm a silly face. Okay. Boom. And now we have room for another stack. Alright. So, but what I'm talking about with color temperature, let's see. Okay. Trying to find someplace that's got pretty natural light. So, basically what I'm talking about is, if I look down here at the cobblestone, at least here in the Faithful pack, there isn't anything, like, any of the warmer feelings that you might be getting looking at this are, like, if you come in and look at this, everything is very distinctly gray. Like, some combination of white and black makes up that color. But if you come over, you know, and this is pretty neutral compared to andesite. Andesite, you have a lot of stuff, and here in this pack, this I would consider very desaturated blues, or purple. Like right in there, that's a bluish color. If you come over here to the Let me see if I can get up to someplace where... Well, I need to sleep, because without daylight, everything gets really dependent on the light source you're using. And I'd like to have less of that messing up what I'm talking about. So, but you remember how in the andesite we have some things that look very, very blue in the block face. Well, now if I come over here to the polished basalt, yes, there's blues in here, but this, I would say, leans very red in through those lines. And even this purple is pretty warm. Like, it feels like it would be red-violet if it was more saturated. And that's where the color temperature thing comes in. And that's where there are certain things that I go, okay, I don't necessarily want to use... There are just certain blocks, even though, yes, they are gray blocks, they just don't work together very well, and then, by the same token, one of the things that I want to do when I get the engines filled in is I want to use blocks of iron, and more than likely it'll also be smooth stone. And that is because I want the engines to feel brighter, like it's some kind of different, more wear-resistant kind of material that has made it up. Because, for all that, yes, this is a fictitious kind of spacecraft in a computer-generated, in a generated world, all of that, like, I'm attempting to treat it like there are aspects of this that are very real. There is a logic for the fantasy, even though I'm not going to sit here and attempt to deny that the fantasy is exactly that. And, if this sounds familiar to you, it should, if you've ever listened, if you've ever watched the appendices for the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Because it's a lot of the same motivating, decision-making choices that I'm putting into this, as they did to attempt to give those original 3 films as much grounding in reality as they could when you're talking about a world that technically has never existed. They had things that they have been trying to do for quite some time, and those are the places where they had to make a decision, like, okay, what do Hobbit feet look like? How do we make Hobbit feet a reality in this world? Well, they did prostheses that were flexible enough that when an actor was standing inside of it, even though it was much longer than their own foot, it didn't look comically large. Like, they weren't super clown shoe-like in how they looked when they were applied to the actor's foot. They apparently went in and made them rather hairy, which, I don't know. For all that I'm glad they didn't, look like Wookiee slippers or something like that. to me, they look mostly like bare feet, and it is what it is. And of course, with Tolkien deciding that hobbits don't usually have beards, it's intriguing to me that in a book series that deals so much with the notion of growing up and coming into responsibilities, that he did so much to make Tolkien did so much to describe the main protagonists as childlike creatures. Now, I think there's some very powerful things that can come from that notion. Not the least of which is when you look at it and see Frodo going, you need somebody to go take this thing to Mount Doom. Okay, I'll take it. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what we're doing. I don't know how we're going to get there or anything like that. Like, I need me my old wizard buddy to help me with this, but like some of the most powerful beings in Middle-earth show up to the Council of Rivendell, and they're kind of stumped on what they're supposed to do. Which just ends up being a very interesting set of themes for courage and bravery for the four hobbits. In that sense, their bravery becomes so essential to the success of that story. Because, if you listen to how Tolkien describes Boromir and Aragorn, Gimli and Legolas, and then, of course, Gandalf is the almost prototypical wizened old wizard that shows up to send everybody on the task that they're supposed to be accomplishing. And I would say the choices that Peter Jackson and his writing partners made for those Lord of the Rings were actually kind of ideal choices. I have problems with certain scenes and how they chose to have certain characters behave, not the least of which is Faramir and the way that they messed with his character, and it has nothing to do with Denethor and his weird tomato thing. It is more like Faramir is a character I don't think you could get most people to believe in film if he had been portrayed as he was in the books. Not even for the relative optimism that I remember the early 2000s having, late 90s, early 2000s. Faramir is he's the altruist that we all would actually look at a little bit leery of, because we want to sit there and be like, there's no way anybody is going to make that choice. There's no way. If the ring was laying on the side of the road, I wouldn't even pick it up. Like, bullshit. Come on, everybody pick it up. Some of us might be smart enough to be like, oh, I don't want to have anything to do with this, really, now that I realized what it is and who made it and why that asshole made it. I'm a little skeptical of having this. I guess better me than somebody else, though. And we see that with the reactions from all of those with true magical power in Lord of the Rings that are like, I believe Gandalf would never take, like, when he says, no, don't give me the ring, because even if I use it meaning to do good, I'm gonna do wrong with it. I believe him, and, if there's one being I feel like I ought to be able to trust not to screw over Middle-earth, it's the ancient angel. It's the eternal good being, the one that didn't fall in the temptations. And even he's sitting there going, okay, if you hand this source of power to me, I'm going to misuse it. Like, it is something about how this power is was created, that even the best of us can't be trusted with it. And you kind of see Tolkien come at it from the other approach when he pulls Faramir in, and Faramir has the line of, like, hey, even if I saw this thing laying on the side of the road, I'm not going to pick it up. And that ends up having a huge impact within the story to go, oh, there are actually some heroes out there that still, like, I would say in the case of Faramir, I think it's that he recognizes that he is a flawed character, and being granted a power source that was strong enough to corrupt an ancestor, and an ancestor who was, near on godlike for a human being. The fact that they couldn't be trusted with this, I'm quite certain I can't be. And so I'm not even tempted to try and pick it up, which is where you see, as with all of the characters, like, the reason Boromir fails is not because his heart's in the wrong place. Like, the desire to be able to use great power and defend your people, like, in that sense, Boromir is not villainous. The struggle is where he's looking for answers is something that is power that will get corrupted. I think if you were to have played it out, with Boromir taking it, well, not only would he end up as, like, worse than the Ringwraiths, but you'd also have, a twisting of humanity as he's trying to save it. You'd have a situation where all of his efforts become futile because the ring has the power to bring about what he wants. Don't ask me how. Again, in this sense, this is one of those places where Tolkien has a very, very soft magic system. That is, you don't really get any details of, oh, well, if you pet Sting 3 times, he's a +1 magic sword or anything like that. Like, that's not how magic works for Tolkien. The ring's powers are never truly enumerated, as in, when I'm playing D&D, if I hand a player an enchanted ring, the first thing they do is, well, what does it do? Which is a very good question, because clearly not every ring is enchanted, and so it has to have some property or other that distinguishes it from, your wedding ring, or something like that. And I think in a lot of ways, because he was not attempting to write allegorically, I think Tolkien is right to not enumerate, like, oh, well, you put, like, the closest we come to having a list of powers for the ring is literally that you can go invisible. That's it. That is what the ring does. You slip the ring on, and you become invisible to the lion's share of people on Middle Earth. Like, that is what it grants you. There's not even an implication that, that it makes you any stronger. It has one power and one curse. The power is it turns you invisible. And given that it takes you to the world of the ring wraiths, it's almost, to use more D&D terminology, it's almost like it's a ring of the Aether, where essentially you become incorporeal. You can kind of see and interact with the prime material plane, but nobody there really knows what's happening. And so you get, I believe it is Gandalf talking to Frodo about why it was so dangerous for him to have the ring on when the Witch King of Angmar stabs him in the shoulder. Because he was actually in whatever sort of demi-plane the wraiths live within. Now, obviously, they have enough presence in the prime material that they can do things like stab people. And there are the vague warnings that, if his knife wound hadn't been healed as soon as it was, if they hadn't been able to save him that way as soon as they could, or as soon as they did, there was a chance that the Morgul blade would have turned Frodo into a wraith. So there's some power to that, but it's like, okay, it doesn't seem to be like, when you consider the fact that Sauron is also, if I'm remembering the Silmarillion correctly, and oh my goodness, I will say it this way: if you want to say you're a Lord of the Rings fan, but you have not slogged your way through the Silmarillion, you're not a bad person at all. But I would say you're not. That is the mark of somebody who is truly dedicated to understanding Tolkien's world. If you have taken the time to go through and slog through the Silmarillion. And I do say slog because I've read it as a book, and Alora has it on our Audible account as one of the books there. So I have an audio book of it, and even with the audiobook, I have not been able to read it again. And I love my reading. it's just that dense and full of, wait, what the hell is going on now? But yes, but essentially Sauron at least starts out as basically the same kind of creature that Gandalf is. So, and again, those of you out there who are super deep into the lore, like I am not that deeply buried in it, and I know this. I'm not trying to compare wits with you guys, but what I'm trying to get to is there doesn't even seem to be the appearance that the ring enhances Sauron's physical traits in any way. Like, this is not like he has a belt of dwarven strength now, or something like that. Like, this is very much a, he's like, if you see, and of course I try to be careful in attempting to talk about things that are supposed to be canon, and using the movie as a demonstration thereof, because I think for the vast majority of folks it is, and just like me, the vast majority of Tolkien fans also acknowledge, like, it's not complete in the way that we might accept from some other sources. So, like, but going back to the fact that essentially Sauron, I believe, is of the same kind of being as Gandalf. There's nothing to me that says that he, like, when you see him flinging combatants around in that opening scene of the movies where Galadriel's doing the voiceover, like, I don't feel like it's... I don't feel like that is the ring causing him to be able to smash human beings 30 feet away from him while swinging the mace. Like, there I think it's more as he grew and was mentored by, was it Melkor? Something along those lines. I always forget his name. But, like, he is the Satan of Middle-earth lore. And Sauron is his apprentice. I want to say a thing, but I'm not going to, because it's going to needlessly upset people. But yeah, so as you have the Grand Alliance that goes to stop Sauron's first attempt to have world domination, one of the things I think the ring doesn't grant him extra strength. I believe most of what you're seeing in those opening scenes is just, this is what a twisted Maya is capable of in their basic form. Now, he may, again, this is where I don't know my Tolkien lore as well as I need to make certain of these assertions. But it is one of those cases where I feel like there's enough evidence of what he's doing to go, okay, his capacity to blast people that far away from him swinging his mace is not part of the ring's powers. It is just he is that capable of feats of strength. Now again, those who might be better learned in their Tolkien lore might be able to adjust my theories there, and yeah, if any of them happen to find this video and wish to correct me in that, I am curious enough to learn. Just understand, as with the vast majority of things that I really enjoy, I don't find the typical nerd pleasure in dissecting every minute detail out of the thing. Like, that's not how I go crazy about them. For me, it is much more I really like this thing, I like enjoying it this way. Which, I mean, that is exactly what applies here in me playing Minecraft. Okay, I don't get into the nitty-gritty unless I find a reason to. To get into, the ultra efficient farms where you've managed to compress an entire farm into this 3-block high thing, which, I mean, hey, the fact that the game can sustain that, great, that's awesome. If that's what you love, enjoy it, please. That's one of the reasons why they're putting features like that in there, is because there are people who are enjoying it that way. I am not one of them. I like taking blocks. I like knocking them out of the ground. I like putting them in my inventory and placing them into shapes that I like. So, understand, just, if you come to talk Tolkien lore, just understand that's where I'm at with things. I find Middle-earth fascinating. There's very much things about it that I enjoy, and I would love having a good discussion about somebody, but understand, I don't go into, the super nerd category. There's a lot of Tolkien lore that I know because I have invested time and effort into learning things about Middle-earth. And that goes for the books as well as for at least the Lord of the Rings films. The Hobbit films, I don't know. I watched them. They were entertaining-ish. I think you see very clearly the difference between, in comparing Lord of the Rings with The Hobbit. I think one of the biggest things that you learn is why doing creative projects by committee is a shit idea. Because, for Lord of the Rings, there's lots of us out there that have opinions about the stories. We've all interacted with them in many different ways. But at the end of the day, I feel like the reason that we consider the films to be so successful is ultimately the studio ended up giving Peter Jackson the control to make the movies. I'm certain there were tons of production notes and the like. But ultimately they ended up saying, hey, this is really good. We're going to trust your judgment on these things. And they let the person with the passion dictate how it got developed. And there's so many other folks that you can look at that were involved in the production that really helped bring Peter's passion project to a reality. But ultimately, I think this is one of the more profound things, and for as much as I don't go super into the Del Toro creepyverse kind of thing, I don't care for that sort of movie making. The fact of the matter is, I one of the quotes that I've heard, and I believe that it was Adam Savage talking with a guest about talking with, I think it was a conversation he had with Guillermo del Toro, that essentially any film has to have its champion. Any successful film has its champion. And, for Del Toro, that is almost always, he wouldn't be on a project if he didn't feel passionate about it. Like I said, I can appreciate certain of his aesthetic choices. I appreciate how he tells certain stories, but he's not, I'm not as big a fan of his. It's the same way. If you ask me what Peter Jackson films I'm a fan of, there's literally only 3 of them. Because, he is one of these guys who really gets into the gore and all of that kind of thing, and that has just never interested me about movies. I don't do horror films, I don't do gore fests. There are certain movies I can tolerate it in, for all that I don't care for it. I understand why Django Unchained is full of the kind of gore and grotesque violence that it has. I also look at it and go, you could tell the same story and use about half the blood packets, and get something that still falls into the category of, this is a very, it is Tarantino hyper-violence. But there's a compelling story reason for it. And that is something I don't think is necessarily always understood in movies like that. Oh, right, I'm too full. So we'll just come up here and that and doot. 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 Okay. I gotta go up a couple more. Alright. Hey, there we go. This is what happens when you put random divisions into your semi-planned options. But yeah, there's certain things that you can look at and go, okay, stylistically, I understand. Like, if I'm watching Quentin Tarantino film, I know there's going to be way more blood than I ever care to have in a movie, for no more reason than that's just one of the things that Tarantino does. I don't think it makes his movies any better, for being that. I don't think it necessarily makes them any worse. So yeah, in that sense, it becomes stylistic choices, and that's where I think Lord of the Rings, you have a very strong sensibility for, this is what we want these movies to be, and that was very much grounded in Peter Jackson's going like, okay, we're going to do a fantasy world. But if you look around at most fantasy movies, the biggest problem that they have is they were treated as fantasy movies, which means that it doesn't take much paying attention for the whole thing to just kind of fall apart. Like, there's too many things that you as the viewer are expected to accept the thing because fantasy. I think it's one of the things that holds certain parts of James Cameron's Avatar back, where it's just like, see, world pretty, awesome storytelling, good job. When you're like, I mean, that helps. I don't think Avatar being the pretty movie that it is, like, hurts it in any way. But there are definitely some things that I look at and go, okay, the planning on this is a cool idea. And, that's fine. There's definitely a place for that. And I feel like Lord of the Rings hit the right balance for most of the movies. Like, the ones that throw me out that were the, hey, let's have a cool moment, as opposed to, like, hey, here's some realistic action, are the Legolas movie, or the Legolas moments, as they started calling them, in Two Towers and Return of the King. Like, the running across the chain to shoot the cave troll is weird, but it kind of makes sense that, in the... here's a being that is in tune with his environment enough to, be able to step off of a chain onto the shoulders of a thing, is going to have enough balance to very quickly, shoot an arrow straight down between his legs and probably not hit himself. Is it something you'd want to try in actual combat? Hell no. It's just not the kind of thing that holds up. And it just gets worse. Like, the skating down the stairs on the shield in the battle at Helm's Deep is goofy, but I think what helped that is it was mostly a practical gag. Like, I know he was on wires, and I know it's really stinking obvious that they tried to get a lot of it done for real. I'm sure there's digital doubles covering some of that. That's fine. But you also then have the weird-ass, counterintuitive way that he flips himself up onto the back of the horse. You're like, well, that's CG. And again, it's one of those things that it's a complaint if you want to stop and break the movie down that granularly. It's a problem. I don't think in and of itself it's necessarily a bad thing to have those cool moments. And I don't think that they were handled terribly. Legolas taking out the Oliphant, the slide down the trunk was a lot of, you're doing too much you're trying to force the Legolas just had a cool moment, instead of just telling a story. is the part where I go, okay, like, I get it. Bravo. I'd have been completely okay with them ending with him doing the shots to the back of the Mama Kill head. Big crash, and he just kind of jumps down off of the head and neck of the Mamakill. And then you get the Gimli, still only counts as one. I think it would have worked just as well doing something along those lines. A lot of it is, it defies too many laws of physics, and there's too clearly places where you're going, okay, yes, you shot footage of now I feel stupid because there's Orlando Bloom standing there looking very elfy doing the thing. Bravo. But everything else about what's happening here, he is the only actual object that is in this frame. And again, I understand, especially considering that this is, early 2000s CG. Like, I think it stands out to me as something that bothers me because so much of the rest of the CG that they did was way more subtle. In keeping with, that production note that got passed around of, like, we want this to look as much as though somebody stumbled across an old archive in the back of, some library or something that we found, where Tolkien himself found the old manuscript and did the work of translating the story so that we can all enjoy it. Peter Jackson and the film crew discovered the films of the actual events. And that is what has been presented to us. So, and again, it's one of those, I totally get the filmmaking choice of being like, let's get some really cool looking stuff on the screen. But I think most of the time for Lord of the Rings, they did a very good job of going less is more. Where when you get into the Hobbit movies, like, it didn't suffer from having a bad, like, the tone that was set is a terrible idea. Give me just a second here. Alright. Give me just a second here. Okay, sorry. There was a chance that was a thing, and... Oops. We're gonna do that. Okay. Sorry, there was a chance that was an important call to take, which is why I went so far as to answer. So, but yeah, I think what you saw happen in terms of the like, putting aside the story problems that they created for themselves that were unnecessary, which is a really big thing you see happening all over the place in Hollywood productions these days, when they're like, when you get handed a pre-existing IP, the first thing you really ought to do, if you're going to sit there and try and write something and call it that, put everything else aside and read the dang source material. Like, start there. Start with the thing that brought an audience in the first place. If you do that, you're going to keep your fans far more, like, you will take that ready-made fan base and have an audience for the thing that you're making. You know, again, it's the good, bad, or ugly. Like, it's one of the reasons why I do respect Henry Cavill so much. Like, for all that, I never played any of the Witcher games. I'm not, like, I don't know the lore there or anything like that. Like, I can respect him for stepping out of projects where they were legitimately not paying attention to things that may, like, that the fan base go, this is what we show up for. If you're gonna call it The Witcher, this is what we want. So, and I think that was another one of the things that happened with The Hobbit, was you had so many people who got a chance to make choices about what happened with the movie who had never read the books. And not only had they never read the books, they didn't care to. Like, I'm okay if you came on to... Because I think... I could be, stretching on this, but I want to say one of the producers was even... for Lord of the Rings, was not a Tolkien fan, had never read the books until he got put on the films, and then he read them and went, okay. And he became one of the champions for telling the story. And, again, this is okay, we can decide whether we agree with all the choices that they made or not, but the fact of the matter is, Peter Jackson, his wife, and Philippa Boyens did their level best to put the story that Tolkien wrote on the screen. Now, they went through it, and for them, the major story of Lord of the Rings is the ring has to be destroyed. And when if you read the books and you go, okay, let's focus on the scenes that are about the ring must be destroyed. Well, it's pretty obvious that most of the story, that a good deal of what they chose to include is in fact the way in which you should tell that story, to tell the story of the ring getting to Mount Doom. And because they had that as their grounding feature, you didn't get strays off these, like, the places that they stray away from the books have more to do with we're trying to tell this part of the story, which is why, for one, like, if you think it's bad listening to people go, why didn't they just fly the ring into Mordor? And that, like, if you thought that was bad, if they had put any of the Tom Bombadil stuff into the film, everybody be sitting there going, like, what do you mean Gandalf saying that he'd just throw it away? Because it's such a hard thing for us to understand, that really the only thing that Tom Bombadil cares about is that he's married to a beautiful woman named Goldberry. And that is the entirety of his... Like, that is how he sees the world around him. It's him and Goldberry, and then there's everything else. And again, there's a place for that when you have several thousand pages worth of story to make. When you've got 3 hours tops for a movie, that's a pretty good place to, like, for all that it eliminates the hobbits getting their swords, the younger hobbits getting their swords, there's not a whole lot there that you lose by losing those sections. There is, whereas all of the time spent on Radagast the Brown, particularly in the very first movie, felt entirely like, oh hey, we're showing off that we know that these events are also taking place. And because you, our audience, are Lord of the Rings fans, and you know this is supposed to happen before Sauron comes, we're going to show off that we know things about what was happening beyond what Bilbo does. And there's a place for that, sure. But it became much more of the, let's get away from, here's Bilbo, the hobbit who doesn't want to go on adventures, that we're now forcing him to go on. How is he going to deal with the distractions and dysfunctions that are, trying to figure out how to have breakfast when you're on the road and you don't have, a proper kitchen to work out of to make a good breakfast, to say nothing of making a good second breakfast, or having any time whatsoever to enjoy levensies. And I'm not upset that they went, hey, let's find places to have the wider world interacting with the story of the Hobbit and the dwarves. But when it comes at such an expense to the story, which we all love the Hobbit because it's Bilbo being the hobbit who doesn't want to miss breakfast, working with the dwarves who want to get their gold back from the dragon, and if they can, getting some revenge on that big old fireworm for killing dad, granddad, and uncle, and all of this. But really it's about dust loot. It's like, okay, fine, but let's have it in a way, and I don't think they did the worst job of it, but when you consider the crappiness of the CG that they did, like, you're doing, was it 10 years later, 15 years later, when your CG stands out so vividly from the Lord of the Rings, that you're getting called on it, like, you've clearly made a mistake. and again, I recognize practical effects cost a lot more, particularly the kinds of things where you might only get a single shot at it. You know, but I do think that is one of the things that made so many of the big moments of the Lord of the Rings movies work, is because so much of what was happening was literally what happened in the camera. It wasn't a CGI head that Aragorn kicked towards the camera. It was an actual stunt head that was laying on the ground that he punted. And we're not talking about the other part of it. We all know that by now. But it's things like that where it's like, okay, he's not just like, I'm kicking at some grass, and they decided, well, hey, let's put him, let's make him punt something away from there, a helmet or a head or whatever. After the fact, no, he literally kicked the helmet or the head or whatever it was that was laying there, and it goes flying towards the camera, close enough that it's like, okay, let's, and, or like watching the gates, the black gates open, like that was hell of impressive. When that was going on. And I think what happened was the mixture of, there was no one artist completely in charge of, like, the Hobbit's movies did not have a single champion. They didn't have one person who was set on them succeeding and being the brilliant follow-ups to a massive movie franchise like most of us, I think, hoped they would end up as. Because I really did hope that they actually would succeed. I love the story of The Hobbit, but when you take away so many of the elements that made Lord of the Rings the special trilogy that it was, like, it's not a surprise to me whatsoever that the Hobbit movies were not particularly successful, because they'd taken away too much. Like, whether you want to point to how much of it was done in committee, which again, that's always, for creativity by committee is always going to end up boring as hell, because there's always somebody on the committee who does not trust that creativity can hold an audience. It's why. So one of the things that, like, I understood, but I always was frustrated when I watched it. So there was a show like Top Chef called Work of Art, and it was decent. There were some things where I sit here and go, okay, I see what the art world is headed for, and yeah, a lot of the judges were walking in with preconceived notions. There were a lot of the very pretentious, the things that make a lot of people go, artists are douchebags. You got a lot of those personality types and defenses of work, and yeah, I don't have patience for some of that. In that sense, I've always been my own person. It's the kind of thing where I heard about my art professor's master's critique, I think it was. And the pretensions of some of the stuff that happened during that I sit there and go like, wow, I am glad that is not the kind of stupidity that we do here. Because, yeah, I just don't have time for people who make pretensions out of things that don't need pretension. So that particular example of my art professor, it was a case of when he was doing his review. I guess it's one of those things where the school he was at, that becomes just a big party night. Everybody gets hammered, and then they look at the artwork. And apparently his professors got into a more than 2-hour discussion because he had as he was getting his work ready, he had chosen not to trim the edges of the watercolor paper that he had used for his pastel work. So if you know watercolor paper, like as artists know it, like it typically you'll buy it in large sheets. And my professor in particular is very, very fond of working as large as he can. I don't know if that was anything to do with his own vision, as in like how his eyes worked, or if that's just he likes having the room. So the bigger you work, especially if you're going to work in pastel, the easier it is to make sure that you're adding detail that can remain crisp where you want it to be crisp, and get that softer pastel look when you're, in the places that you want to do that. And so he had done all of these works on watercolor paper. So you're talking I think in most cases they sell it as 24 by 36, so 2 foot by 3 foot sheets. But in most cases, if you're buying those as individual pieces, which he was doing because a higher quality product that way, they leave ragged edges on the paper. So if it has nice squared up edges, somebody's come back later with a knife or some other means of creating a straight line and cut it down. Well, as he was matting up his work for his display, he chose not to get rid of it. And by his story, they spent 2.5 hours talking about how him leaving these ragged edges has something to do with, the inner chaos of humanity's choices. And if this is starting to sound pretentious, it better, because what the and that's the kind of pretentious art stuff that I really, really don't like. It's needlessly pretentious. It's an attempt to, I won't say it's nefarious. It's not like these folks were sitting there being like, oh, well, clearly he's, these are the things that he's, it's an attempt to over-justify your own existence, the existence of the artwork that you've created, which is one of the reasons why, as much as I would be intrigued to have seen if I had made it very far on a show like that. I'm also rather certain I wouldn't, because I don't talk about my stuff in pretentious ways. Like, if I draw a dwarf holding an axe, I'm going to talk about how it's a dwarf holding an axe. Now, I might tell you the story of how this particular dwarf in my D&D world is this important character because of this. But I'm not going to sit here and blow smoke rings up your ass about how, I am drawing dwarves with big, heavy beards because I feel like, masculinity has been, under siege for, by the matriarchy for years or some stupid shit like that. I'm going to go, it's a dwarf holding an axe. If you want to look at deeper things about, why it is that I, draw so many dwarves with axes, sure, let's have a discussion about that. But I'm not sitting here trying to make some kind of political statement. I'm drawing stuff that I think is cool. And again, if you, under the right circumstances, if somebody wants to have that conversation of like, okay, what do you find so, why are dwarves with axes such an inspiring subject for you? Why do you keep looking to make that, make things that look right, that you take in, like at this point I have read too much about the design choices that got made during production for Lord of the Rings, that I understand why they've chosen to build and like the motifs that they have for dwarven armor are the way that they are. Well, I don't know anybody that could read up on all of those choices and not have some of that end up spilling into how they design dwarves. Because, I basically am left with one of two options. I either adopt it, which I kind of do, or I dismiss it. And, essentially kind of, I then have to create okay, well, if I'm not using that justification for why dwarven axes look one way, but, for as unlikely as we are to expect to see a dwarven or an elvish berserker, you have to allow for a certain amount of, hey, this has informed my thoughts on dwarves. And so it still shows up. There's a reason why a lot of my dwarven architecture and motif work and what have you ends up being based more around squares and straight lines than why my elven stuff kind of shows up and really doesn't have right angles and in straight lines to it. I've actually put it to use in how I think about the world that I use for D&D, and when I can get my crap together and start making the things I'd like to make for selling stuff. In fact, one of the things that I gave myself a project. I'm still trying to decide what I would like to pursue on it. But one of the things I've thought about is I'm a big fan of Magic the Gathering. At least I'm a big fan of playing Magic the Gathering. There are plenty of you out there far more dedicated, far more interested in the game and how it's developed and the meta of it and all of this. And again, that's me once more describing the fact that, like, I get into certain things in my way because that's what pulls me into it, you know. And for me, with Magic, it's the challenge of sitting there going, okay, I want to play this thing. I want to try, with the understanding I have, to elicit these things in a game. This is how I want to, you know, like, okay, well, I've really liked dragons. So, you know, those of you who've been paying attention earlier this year, Tarkir Dragon Storm came out. Well, now I have a Tiamat deck built in part from other dragons that I've picked up over the year, you know, as I've been collecting, and stuff that has come with the things that have come with Tarkir, the different dragons and the like. But yeah, there are certain things that I like, but one of the things that I have decided might be worth looking into doing, because it won't take me tons to make the artwork. That is to say that it's not going to be like, I'm not going to be making so many different things that I like, there can be a lot going on that I'm trying to do, and basically what I'm trying to have happen is I want a way to make art for Magic the Gathering that people can use, but that is going to have to happen in very particular ways, and one of the ways that I found that I can go, oh, okay, well, without stepping on toes and legalities and the like, one of the things that has come to mind is tokens. You know, not everybody does more than have. So let's not do that. Though I would laugh if they made something where that actually mattered. Sorry, little one. Just trying to kill all your big herd mates. But yeah, one of the things that I'm working to do with that is also then make it part of, like, visually what I'm going to be drawing for those various tokens, and that is stuff that I'm going to put in my world, which I call Canelin. So it'll actually end up being some of the first artwork and ways that you might be able to get hands on my work in my world. I'm trying to do... So, one of the things before I moved out here to to Colorado that I did went to a workshop for artists called One Fantastic Workshop. I believe there were some things that happened, and it is no longer a going concern. Once again, my lack of attempting to stay on top of political situations, other things like this, ended up with me not really paying attention, just kind of hearing from the periphery that things had happened that were perhaps not the greatest things to have happen. But one of the things that they talk about is, like, that I got a chance to do is talk with Sean Andrew Murray, who, if you don't know, has created a world of his own called Gateway. And I absolutely find it very interesting what he did with it, his inspirations for it, all of that. But I got a chance to talk with him and kind of go like, okay, I have some things going, but I don't really. Not when you come right down to it. And one of the things that he suggested, and it makes a lot of sense given his own background in some of this, is the notion that if you can keep things within your own, like, you can make it completely like a product that is unrelated to what you're using it for. But you still want to have your ideas contained within a certain structure. And so one of the things that he suggests is kind of you have your own, or like during part of his talk is like, build your own IP. Build something that is yours, that no matter what people around you ask for, what they want, what they see you do, no matter what in that, you have something to hold on to that is yours. And it took me a number of years, because the workshop I went to was 7 years ago. And since then, I've done a lot of thinking, I've done a lot of playing RPGs and that kind of thing, and I have a lot invested into my D&D world now, and because of that, I've decided what I'm going to do is, as I get the opportunities for it, I want to build in that world. So if I write a story, I'm writing a story in that world. If I'm if I'm drawing characters, I'm drawing characters for that world. I'm using gameplay things to establish rules and whatnot in the world. And so, as I'm looking at this, it's looking at the notion of making tokens to be able to play with Dungeons and Dragons. It really does become okay, if I'm doing goblins, these are going to be Cannelan goblins. If I'm doing zombies, these are going to be Cannelan zombies. Or if I'm doing birds, these are going to be birds from Cannelan. Things like that to sit there and go, okay, if you want to know more about my world before I've had the opportunity to, release any, World Bible type stuff, or make any tabletop RPG support products with it. There will be ways that you can go, oh, okay, I can get this, and that's going to be a World of Canelin thing. So, again, the goblins that I have are going to look a little different than most other goblins. Like, Magic the Gathering really likes to make their goblins look comedically horrific. So you're not supposed to, you're only supposed to take Magic the Gathering goblins seriously if there's a bunch of them. And there's lots of ways for you to get bunches of them in playing the game, but you ought not to be intimidated by a singular goblin in the way Magic the Gathering lore works. Well, that's great. That informs why they do goblins the way that they do. That's why even when they did the Lord of the Rings set, those Lord of the Rings goblins were more along the lines of Magic the Gathering or goblins than what you had seen from the movies. Now, some of that was I don't know all of the details and licensing agreements and so on that led to Magic being able to make Lord of the Rings Magic the Gathering cards. But it is one of the reasons why those goblins don't look like the kinds of goblins and orcs from the movies. And again, I don't really see a difference. There's certain things that they did that I'm like, okay, I guess that works. I was not worried one way or the other how they were going to include these particular races, but now that we've done it, we've done it. That fine, whatever. At least the art looks really good because it's really good art. It's one thing I will always give Magic props for. It's one of the reasons why, even when I don't actively collect, I'm always intrigued to see new cards. I'm half tempted to grab some of the staple cards from both the Final Fantasy VII and the set that's about to release, because they redesigned the Soul Ring finally. I like the Soul Ring art, but it is boring as snot for it to be, what you see most of the time. And I get, you don't want to constantly be redoing artwork for cards, especially when you know that card's going to be something that gets reprinted regularly. Because again, they're putting out money anytime they ask an artist to make art for Magic the Gathering. Well, that can add up very quickly in the costs of creating new cards. So, with WotC and, more importantly, is it Hasbro? Owns them in D&D. But with they're looking at it as these are entertainment things. We want max profits for max efficiency. Well, that means there are certain things that are not going to, you're not going to get a unique soul ring for every set at that point. It's not going to happen. Because it goes into so many products. Well, having to pay, 20 different artists the royalties for making that thing, it doesn't make sense financially for them to do something like that. Like, as much as those of us who love the game and would love to see loads of options for our favorite staples, like, yeah, some of that's just not going to happen. And it's unfortunate, but it is one of the other reasons why you might want to consider dropping more money for certain types of cards, because they did release a special art version of it, even though it's like I said, especially with the staples, you tend to see them deciding not to make anything particularly flashy for it. Like I said, eventually that pretty much all comes down to the... Alright, Mr. Man, come here. There you are. You do want buckets of water. Well, I could do buckets of water. How about I go get some more buckets of water? But yeah, there are places and things for that. I'm not going to attempt to do proxy stuff. I don't want to get caught up in licensing issues, and for very good reason. Wizards of the Coast defends their property. Like, if you're one of their artists, they're pretty free about letting you go in and do stuff, especially if it's with your own cards. They like going to their own artists to be like, hey, is there something in these sets you'd like to take a crack at in your style? But they do, for, I think, very, very good reasons, guard a lot of those kinds of things closely, because they want to, it is their intellectual property. They want to get the monetary benefit from providing it. That's how capitalism works. I am 100% okay with... Yeah, why not? It's going to be way more than I need, but... Okay, so he will buy at most one more bucket. I'm going to guess he'll buy maybe 2 more buckets, and that'll be it for him. They get expensive, but I do at this point have... I do at least at this point have the... there you are, buddy. I've got the iron to make this work, so... Well, you're going to come over here and up and... Hi, buddy. You take another one? Okay, that's... Alright, that works out for me. Thank you. I needed more emeralds. But yeah, it's... So that's why I'm thinking things like doing tokens, not using much by way of the branding, the look of their cards, that kind of thing. Like, I will have headers and spacers, and why is that dolphin so far up? Hey buddy, do you need help? Do you need help? Alright, come here, buddy. Let me help you. Here, this is a bad place for dolphins. There you go. You beached yourself. Poor guy. Alright. But yeah, so it's like, I'm not looking to break the bank on anything. I'm not looking to redo cards that already exist, per se. Like, the kinds of cards I would be making artwork for are the kinds of cards that they are already, like, there's already so many options out there for people to use that it's just, it's not how it, like, it's not the kind of thing that's going to draw tons of attention, especially when I market them as game tokens. So there will be certain things that I won't be able to make particular tokens for, because that gets into IP things. But it's not like Magic the Gathering has, as much as they might want, they don't have a trademark on Goblin or Orc or Skeleton, or, you know, like, so to sit there and be like, oh, hey, it's a this. Now, if I were to sit there and go like, well, this is the Abyssal God or something like that, like, okay, there's two properties that I'm stepping on toes on if I do that. Well, I'm not going to do those. Because that's just not... Or if I do, it would be the, oh, hey, I did a contest, I will make you a game token for whatever you want. It's not for sale. It's just you want a contest where I make art for you, and you chose a thing. I did not monetarily profit from you getting this. And again, it's a very slender thing when it comes to some of the legalities on it by doing it that way. But the fact of the matter is that if you do those, you can get yourself to the point of like, hey, I'm doing the thing that I love. I have a feeling for a lot of it. I'm going to be the only person who actually ends up having any real benefit from it, because I'm going to start with tokens I already need in my decks. And I just, instead of having a dry erase token there to make my own thing for it, it's I chose to make my own token completely. So, but yeah, that's why there are things that it's going to be that'll be a slightly touchy subject. And again, maybe it'll draw some attention to me from, ADs that work for WotC, and then, I have... At that point, it goes, hey, this is, essentially here's a business card from me. Or a calling card or something like that, to go like, hey, I've seen what your stuff is, here's what my stuff is with your stuff. And for some people that will be reason and excuse enough to go, hey, we like your work, we'd like to see, would you be willing to do this for us? And at that point I will have to pretend like I know what I'm doing when it comes to reading a contract and how much time I have and so on and so forth. And I might, again, it's one of those ways that I'd be like, oh shoot, I get to have a hand in the process, even if only briefly or for, a single run of it. I get to have a little bit of a part of such a major cultural thing that, hey, that's actually really cool that I get a chance to do that. And then maybe I look at it and go, okay, well, I appreciate the offers, but I want to know, okay, what can I do with these images? What can't I do? Because I don't, again, I'm not looking to have legal fights over artwork that I make until I need to, because ideally we reach the point where, certain websites known for their integrity of, purpose and sourcing from the Eastern world, if my art gets enough attention, there's going to be people who want to make money off of the things that I do. And by the way, they don't want to make that money by paying me for what I've done. And those are the people that I'm not afraid to have legal battles with. So, again, it's not like I'm searching for it, and especially for a product like Magic, I don't want to have struggles with them. I just want to enjoy the game, and you know what? Here, like, for me, it was looking at tokens like, hey, that actually might be a way that I can do something I enjoy. And there's a chance that I can either start drawing people to sorry, I'm getting ready to wind down, even though I'm kind of in the middle of this ramble. But yeah, it's the kind of thing like, I like the game, I want to play the game, this is a way I can enhance my game and my experience of it. If I can get myself put together to put it out on the internet, whether it's here on YouTube, like one of the thoughts I've had is, in fact, taking the camera and filming myself drawing this, going through the process, put it out there, see what you guys do with it. And at the moment I don't have the website backing to go like, oh, hey, let's put this here, and let's, and you can go and get your own copies doing this. I would charge more for the PDF format, only because what I would do at that point is go, hey, you've got the PDF, you can print it as many times as you like. Because just like with, certain things like D&D handouts and things like that, it's like, I'm sorry, there are certain parts of games that can be replicated, and I don't have a problem with that. So if you want to get yourself some really fancy cardstock and print off my versions of tokens for playing with your game, great, I love it. It may also be the kind of thing that, if I can pull in people who are enjoying what I'm putting out there for the world of Canalyn, it's a way to go, hey, here's another little piece that you may be able to use this beyond just simply going, hey, that's a really cool thing you're working on. It's a way to make what we called in the workshop, it's lifestyle items. It's hopefully having gained enough audience for Canalyn, I can then come back and go, okay, you guys like Canalyn. Here's something that you might be able to do that brings your love of that to your gaming table in a significant way. The same way, I don't think, because for now my brain is mostly thinking line drawings, because they're fast and I really enjoy working with them. So it's going to be, and that's another thing when it comes to printing off a token. If it's just black and white, that makes it a whole hell of a lot easier to print off, and you're not, you're only using your black ink at that point, hopefully. For people who are doing their proxies that way. And it's just finding those kinds of things to try and tie people in between. The other thing that has come up has been game mats. I'm more than happy to give you like if I can find a place that prints what I consider to be a quality game mat, I will be more than happy to offer people something like that, where now you can take some art that I've made and take it with you when you go play at your LGS, and people will go, wait, what is that? As ultimately, I don't care how good AI gets. I don't care how advanced certain forms of algorithm get. The best way to get knowledge of a product, a person, what have you, out there is word of mouth. Most of the people that if you were to go to my personal YouTube account and look at the people that I have subscriptions to, most of them are subscriptions from people who've talked about, or they did collabs with, or what have you, that I got in there and went, oh, hey, I like all the stuff that you're doing with this. Word of mouth is still the number one marketing tool in the world. I don't care how good your AI is. You're going to have to... And that's because AI works procedurally. You have to input a bit of data for it to then extrapolate a larger set of data. So I will use this analogy. My best man and his wife, one of the things that made him stop at her profile while they were both doing some online dating, the reason he stopped at her profile was because under her likes she had put swimming. He also put swimming. It is something that AI might catch and would, by analog put them to, by its algorithm may have paired them, but they meant two very different things. My buddy was going, I like to go swimming. His wife swam competitively in high school. What they meant by swimming was two very, very different things as far as that goes. And that's where a computer algorithm is never going to replace interacting with another human being. Human beings cannot be synthesized down into a profile blurb. You can certainly put certain things that mean a great deal to you into your profile blurb. But that's still, that is like the upper ledge of an iceberg of the person that is you. And so that's where it's why word of mouth will never get replaced by AI algorithm seeking in spreading things that people like to other people. So I have rambled quite a bit. I need to get myself ready to go ahead and take care of my little one. So I'm going to go ahead now and wrap this stream up. I hope I have not babbled way off topic too much. Again, I am TanktheElder. This is Magic and Mayhem. Please hit the like and subscribe. Share this around with your friends. Anything to grow this would be absolutely appreciated. And I will catch you guys next week, probably on Wednesday. So, thank you very much.